On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, Bradley fighting vehicles set sail to Ukraine. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. So 60 Bradley fighting vehicles were loaded on board a U.S. merchant ship and set sail to Europe for eventual delivery to the nation of Ukraine. And there was a post on Twitter that raised an interesting question that I want to address today. Is this ship a legitimate target for Russia? Thought it was an interesting question asked, particularly since this is the 106th anniversary of the day that Germany declared unrestricted submarine warfare for the second time against the United States and Great Britain and all the allies in World War I, and it will eventually lead to U.S. entrance into World War II. It's not the Zimmerman telegram. It's the sinking of 10 American merchant ships and the killing of 64 merchant crewmen on board that leads to U.S. entry into World War I, Reed Wilson's declaration of war speech. He mentions the Zimmerman telegram once. The rest of the 45-minute speech is about attacks on U.S. sovereignty. So let's go ahead and take a look at this question. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's delve into this. So this is the aforementioned tweet. It was posted yesterday by SubBrief. Rules of war question. Is this transport ship leaving the United States with armored vehicles for Ukraine a military target? Can Russia legally sink this ship? And again, I think it raises a very interesting question. It's gotten a lot of views, over 100,000 views you'll see there, and a lot of comments, including comments from me. So let's go ahead and take a look at the background from this. So first off, there was a question about, oh my God, you're violating operational security in releasing this information. No, this was the United States Transportation Command brief on this. Their news bulletin that talked specifically about this was released on Monday, showing pictures of the 60 Bradley vehicles being loaded in Charleston on board the vessel, the Ark Integrity. That is a vessel of American roll-on, roll-off carriers. And what you see here is a variety of pictures that are showing this. And this is all part of that big aid package that's heading over to Ukraine. We just heard about the decision to send M1 tanks over. But here's a quote from the head of United States Transportation Command, Air Force General Jacqueline von Ovest. The situation in Ukraine really brought to the forefront the importance of logistics and the complexity of power projection and sustainment. Our support to Ukraine would not be possible without the strong relationship we have with our allies and partners that provided the access, basing, and overflight to facilitate the delivery of aid. It goes on here, the loading of the equipment was overseen by Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca D'Angelo of the 841st Transportation Battalion. This is an element of the Surface Deployment and Distribution Command. This is part of United States Transportation Command. SDDC does the landside operation. Military Sealift Command does the seaside operation. And the embarkation of these Bradleys is unique. Now, this is not a vessel that is chartered solely for the transportation of these vessels. If we look at Ark Integrity, here she is right here, U.S. flag carrier. She sailed from Dundalk, that is Baltimore, on January 27th and is en route right now to Southampton, Great Britain, with an ETA of February 7th. Again, this is all open source. This is marine traffic showing you this information. Come down here. This is a vessel that was built in 2008. The builder was Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering. The owner is Wilmington Trust Company. These ships are owned by these trust companies because of liability issues. And the managing company is American Roll-On, Roll-Off Carrier. And American Roll-On, Roll-Off Carrier is a major player here. They have a fleet of 8 roll-on, roll-off ships that are all U.S. flagged, none of them U.S. built. They are brought into the U.S. flag under a program I'll discuss here in a second. But the ship in question here is on the bottom left. This is Ark Integrity, and you'll see that the Ark Integrity is still in its green and white Wallenius Lines colors. Wallenius Lines is the parent company for Ark. They're a foreign company who runs big operation in roll-on, roll-off, largely what are called either PCCs, pure car carriers, or PCTCs, pure car and truck carriers. The vessel that's of extreme importance is the Endurance. That's a really big roll-on, roll-off vessel, really an ideal platform for the moving of military equipment. Arc Integrity was on its kind of regular schedule. As a matter of fact, you can pull up and see its regular schedule, which I'll show you in a second. Here's the details for Arc Integrity. You're seeing the particulars of the vessel here, 747 feet long. It's got a ramp strength of 240 tons, door height of 21 feet, drive width of 31 feet, and a stow area that is very comparable. And matter of fact, what you see here in the schedule is this ship is on its normal schedule run. If you pull up here on the scheduled routes, over here to Arc Integrity, she loaded in Brunswick, Georgia on 8 January. She was in Galveston on 13 January. She was in Charleston on 24 January. She shifted up to the military terminal up on 25 January, Baltimore on 27 January. Now she is due into Southampton on 7 February, Antwerp on 9 February, and Bremerhaven on 11 February. Not sure where the Bradleys are coming off, probably Bremerhaven or Antwerp, but that's her scheduled route that she's on. Now, the ship is one of 60 in what's called the Maritime Security Program. This is the latest flyer put out on the Maritime Security Program by the Maritime Administration. This was a program that was started in 1996, initially envisioned with 47 vessels. It has since been expanded up to 60 vessels. These ships receive a subsidy of $5 million apiece every year. So 60 ships, $5 million is a $300 million a year program. And the purpose of this program was to replace the old Merchant Marine Act of 1936 operational differential subsidy. There was a program started in 1936 that in an effort to offset the higher cost to build and maintain vessels, there was a creation of what was called differentials. There was a construction differential and an operation differential. And what this did was offset the cost to build in the United States and then keep ships flagged in the United States with U.S. crews on board. And again, if you're sitting there going, well, why is the government doing this? Very clearly, the minimum wage for international mariners right now is $21 a day. That is substantially less than the minimum wage for just a normal employee in the United States, not including one who is skilled and trained in being a merchant mariner. So you cannot compete against merchant mariners who are being drawn from the Philippines, from China, from Indonesia, from India, and Russia, because, again, Americans have a higher standard of living, so it costs more to operate U.S. ships. The problem with the Maritime Security Program is this. While we put the operational differential back in with the Maritime Security Program, we never put the construction differential back in. So a lot of these vessels that you see here, for example, like the Arc Integrity, are not built in the United States. They're foreign-built vessels. They come from building overseas. There's even some Chinese-built vessels in this fleet. Very few of these vessels, if any, are U.S.-built. Instead, almost all of these are foreign-built ships that their parent lines, for example, Arc Integrity is Wallenius. You have Maersk. You have Hauppauge in here. You have APL, which is owned by CMA CGM. This is a program that puts American crews and American ships with American flags on board, but it does nothing to help U.S. shipbuilding. But it is still essential. These vessels are essential for delivering the sustainment. And right now, what we're seeing is these vessels are providing a key element here. So the transportation of those 60 Bradleys are really important. Arc Integrity, the ships of the Maritime Security Program, along with the vessels that are in the Surge Sealift fleet. These are the vessels held by Military Sealift Command and the Maritime Administration in the Ready Reserve Force, are essential for not just the routine deployment of troops, but also these emergency deployments, like 60 Bradleys going to Ukraine. But these routine deployments are really highlighting some issues that are really important to understand concerning the age and really dilapidated condition of the U.S. Sealift fleet. So, for example, here's a January 2023 story. Earlier this month, Army announces unit preparation for potential deployments in support of European allies and partners. And if you go back through these stories here from the Army, one of the things you hear about is the deployment of routine divisions. You'll see all these units coming. So the 3rd Combat Aviation Brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division, upcoming 4th Division rotations, Gordons, the 1st Cav, 2nd Infantry, 1st Infantry. And so you see all these kind of rotations taking place. These rotations are done on U.S. vessels, either vessels like Ark Integrity of American roll-on, roll-off carriers, or some of the other roll-on, roll-off carriers in the MSP fleet, or the gray hull Surge Sealift. The problem with that is a recent deployment involving USNS Gordon. This is USNS Gordon returning back to its lay berth in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, the problem that you may not be very obvious here with USNS Gordon is off the bow right here is a large tow line. This ship, which is a conversion vessel, which was the oldest of the large medium-speed roll-on, roll-off vessels. So after the Persian Gulf War, not only did you get the Maritime Security Program, you got 20 ships that were built or converted into what were called large, medium-speed, roll-on, roll-off vessels. Large because they're over 900 feet long, medium speed because they're 24 knots, and they were designed to fill a gap in the fleet. 20 of them were built or converted, 15 built, 5 converted. Gordon is one of the conversion class vessels. She just completed a shipyard down in Mobile, Alabama. She was loading one of these units for deployment to Europe, got out into the Atlantic, and then broke down. Had to be brought back into Charleston, and now here she is at the end of a tow line being towed from Charleston back to her lay berth in Baltimore. This is a 40-year-old ship, and this is indicative of the problem we're having with Surge Sealift. But let's get back to the question that was raised by SubBrief. Is an attack on, or should the Ark Integrity be considered a fair target for attack by the Russians? Now, let's be clear. The Russians have been pretty brazen in their attacks. There's a story from just the other day on Maritime Executive. 2 Turkish cargo ships hit by possible missile in Ukraine. Vessels that have been owned by NATO allies have been hit repeatedly during this conflict. An Estonian-owned vessel was sunk, the Helt. Multiple vessels of Turkey and other UN nations and other NATO nations have been hit. Mines have been discovered in the waters of Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey. However, what has not happened is, while ownership of the vessels is clear, the registration is different. In the case of these 2 vessels, they're not Turkish flag vessels. They're flagged on the island of Vanuatu, which you may know if you watch any episode of Survivor, but this is an island in the middle of the Pacific, and Vanuatu is basically just an open registry flag. And so these vessels are being attacked because, to tell you the truth, the Russians could care less whether Vanuatu, Bangladesh, Panama, the Marshall Islands, or any of these open registry countries do anything about them. And we've seen these attacks take place. They have not triggered any response from anyone at this point. We haven't seen NATO go into the Black Sea. We haven't seen convoys escorting out vessels from Ukraine. The ships sailing from Ukraine right now sail individually on a set path, but with no protection or escort by naval vessels. And so the question becomes, can Russia attack the Ark Integrity as it's sailing across the Atlantic to the Europe? Well, take your example from 106 years ago, on this day in history, when Germans unleashed U-boats. On January 31st of 1970, Germany announces the renewal of unrestricted submarine warfare in the Atlantic as German torpedo-armed submarines prepare to attack any and all ships, including passenger carriers said to be sighted in the war zone. This was the beginning of what eventually becomes American entrance into World War I. The Germans declared an area around Europe, particularly around the British Isles, as an area of unrestricted submarine warfare. The Russians would have to do the same, and it's very doubtful the Russians would ever do that, obviously, because not only would an attack on a ship like Ark Integrity be much more brazen, it is outside the boundaries of Ukrainian waters and Ukrainian territory. This would be out in open international waters or in territorial waters of another nation. But it would be an attack on a U.S. flag vessel. And while Ark Integrity was built in Korea and owned by a company in the United States that's parent company is headquartered back in Europe, it is still an American flagged vessel. If you want to go into this a little bit more, I recommend Rodney Carlisle's Sovereignty at Sea, U.S. Merchant Ships and American Entry into World War I. And excellent analysis of how the attack on U.S. merchant ships led up to our entry into World War I. And any attack on U.S. shipping would be a direct attack against the United States, would require U.S. immediate retaliation. Now, Ark Integrity is sailing across the Atlantic unescorted. At least no surface vessels are with it. Is she being monitored? Probably satellite tracked, maybe submarine tracked, probably being tracked in many other ways. Her AIS is squawking so you can get the satellite transponder on them, but there is no vessel that's escorting her across the Atlantic. Because, again, she's carrying 60 Bradley fighting vehicles, but the heart of her cargo is commercial shipping cargo. That's a very small portion of this. And, again, we're seeing U.S. ships repeatedly going to and from the United States and Europe, doing routine rotation of American forces, brigade units, battalion units, reinforcements sending over, military aid being sent over. John Conrad over in G Captain, I mentioned this in my What the Ship episode this week, talked about this issue of sea blindness, where we're fixated on Russian oil caps, the Russian ghost fleet of tankers. We're focused on Ukrainian grain ships coming out, but we're not paying attention to U.S. flag vessels delivering military aid over to our allies in Europe in this time, and how essential it is to have U.S. flag vessels doing this. And I think this is a prime example about this too. So go back to Aaron at SubBrief's answer. Yes, this would be an act of war should Russia do it. There's no question about it. Now, would Russia do it? Who knows? No one can figure out what Vladimir Putin's going to do. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit that super thanks button down below. You can contribute directly to the page, or head on over to Head on over to Patreon, and you'll be able to become a monthly or yearly subscriber. Appreciate all the support and effort that goes to this page. Until our next video, this is Sal, signing off.